The whole purpose of this is to bring some supplemental perspectives to the work that's being done by the Soquel Creek Water District and by the Santa Cruz Water Department and many other groups that are been concerned about water. So this is just to bring some additional perspectives to bear that hopefully will prove out to be educational. What it is not is it's not an attempt to look at all the array of programs that either the Soquel Creek Water District has underfoot or the Santa Cruz Water Department has, because both of those organizations have quite a bit going on in terms of their own explorations and infrastructure improvements, and they've got their different programs for their fee structures and so forth. That's not what this is about at all. We're just looking at two key issues: the overdraft problem that Soquel has and the drought protection and drought security program that Santa Cruz has. So what we'd hope to do here, and hopefully there'll be perspectives on this and we can have Q&As, is to look at those two issues, which are really the two critical issues that both of these organizations are confronting, and sort of writ large, that the community at large and the region at large has yet to resolve. And clearly these two issues are going to need to be resolved one way or another over the next 6 months to year plus. So I want to welcome, is it Curt? Curt Abramson, who is a private well owner, and also Scott McGilvray and Randa Solick, who will be helping to facilitate this. So I don't know which of you would like to go first, but
yeah, that could be.
Yeah, well, hi, I'm Randa Solick, and we had invited people from all of the districts, from all of the water districts, and they wrote that they thought that they had enough time in their public meetings to allow people to talk to them from the public, that they didn't think they should come here tonight. So I thought that was too bad. When I've been to the water meetings of various districts, there's 10 or 20 minutes for questions. They let people ask questions, they answer a little bit, and they just go on with their business. So this is a place that we can just talk to each other and listen to some other things that the water districts sometimes don't bring up. So we'll have each presenter have about 6 to 8 minutes to present. It's up to you. Want to go first?
Well, I think we need to draw. We said
okay, so draw. There's only 2 of you.
it's a 50-50 show.
No problem. We take another 3.
Show good faith.
Jerry Paul will probably end up coming. Okay, Curt. And
cut the ace of spades here.
so we'll do each presentation.
I have number 1, so it doesn't really matter.
Number 2. There will be another presentation.
Do you have slides?
I don't have a presentation, I'm just willing to talk.
That's it.
Okay.
So when Scott talks, if people have questions afterwards, I'll take a stack, 1, 2, 3, and you can ask questions.
I think this.
And I think that's all that we need. If you have questions for anybody in the audience, then you're welcome to contact them directly. Hey, Marilyn. I think there's some seats up here. Look. Yep.
Hi there.
And
Let me pass this around for anybody who has not signed in.
Alright, so we'll listen to Scott, we'll have questions, then Curt, maybe you want to say some words or just take questions, and then we'll talk to each other since we don't have to talk like panels tonight, okay? Okay, thanks. You're on.
Okay, well, here we are. This is 7 slides. We are a group.
Can you all see the slides from here?
You see that?
None of us are in your way? I can't read it. Yeah, can you make it bigger?
I'll try.
Yeah.
Now I can turn it over sideways. I think I can make it even bigger. On the left-hand side of the screen is a logo. There's a picture of a river. That's the spillway, the Loch Dam. And that's water coming over the dam on the 3rd of March 2015. That's our actual water supply. Water for Santa Cruz has a mission statement, and the mission statement is to use to the greatest degree possible the extra water that comes in the winter, to harvest that water and use it throughout the county, store it in the aquifers, send it to Soquel Creek, send it to Scotts Valley, but to use that water before we do anything like build a reclaimed water plant. We wanted to put this forum on because there is a new agency in town called the Mid-County Groundwater Agency that is in charge of the groundwater basin and getting a sustainable relationship with it, and it's larger than either Soquel Creek or Santa Cruz. It covers both districts, and we think that the solution is to take the extra water that Santa Cruz has and combine it with the extra storage that Soquel Creek has and put the two together. What we believe is that there are really three components that have to be demonstrated to exist. If we can do this, we can do it right away.
That's perfect.
The three components are additional water, storage in aquifers, and infrastructure to treat the water and transport the water. So it boils down to three. That's hard to read. The three questions. How much extra water do we have in the San Lorenzo River? We have the rights to 900 million gallons a year. In the last 19 years, we have pumped an average of 47 million gallons of water out of it, meaning we have 850 plus million gallons of water that goes down the San Lorenzo River that we have the rights to and we don't use. So that's our extra water. But you got to have rights to move the water, and the water that comes down the San Lorenzo is restricted to use in the San Lorenzo watershed. But Santa Cruz has other water rights. It has all the water from the North Coast. Up until 1960, 1955, our water supply in Santa Cruz didn't even come out of the San Lorenzo River. It was a tannery, logging river. Our water came from the North Coast, came from Laguna and Majors and Lydell Springs. So we looked into the amount of water that comes from the North Coast, and over a 32-year period of time, I can't get the information behind that, we've averaged almost 1 billion gallons, 995 million gallons a year for 32 years. And we also looked into the future. The Santa Cruz Water Department puts out an urban water management plan every 5 years. The latest one came out in 2015 and looks forward to 20 years. And the Santa Cruz plan includes using 671 million gallons a year from the North Coast. So we have water, we have extra water in San Lorenzo, we have water rights that allow us to move water to Soquel Creek in the amount of 670 million gallons. The last thing we have is we have the capacity to treat the water and ship it, and we do. We have capacity to treat it, and there is an intertide between Soquel Creek and Santa Cruz that can move 1.4 million gallons of water a day in either direction. We actually used it this winter when the pipe broke in the San Lorenzo River area, and water went from Soquel Creek to Santa Cruz for 4 or 5 days, went in the other direction. So these three things are enormous. They mean we have water, we have rights, and we got the infrastructure to move around. That's the simple. Those are the three things we have to have. And the facts of all of them are positive. So it looks like this. On the left is a groundwater replenishment purification process that takes water from the sanitary sewage, it treats it again, it pipes it to groundwater recharge injection wells, it goes into the ground, it comes out, it gets treated again, and it goes to houses. The other alternative is this river water transfer purchase, where water comes down the river, it's treated by the treatment plant, goes in the pipes, and goes to houses. So one is obviously much simpler than the other. Underneath, we have the costs of the two alternatives. The cost of the simple alternative is $650,000 pipe studies. Water is available, it's in the pipe right now. so we start this winter. Environmental impact is almost negligible because pipes exist and water otherwise goes down the river. The other proposal is going to cost $65 million, and the earliest it can start is the spring of 2023. And there are more environmental impacts. So why would we want that when we can have this? The Soquel Creek Water District doesn't believe the $650,000 estimate. They are believing that the estimated cost is $131 million to do the water transfer. So we agree on the systems, but we don't agree on what it costs. So we need to look into it a little bit. This is a table. This is the table from the study. And I think the only one who can read it is me. I turn backwards. But I will point to it up there so that you can get a copy of this. We'll put this on our website, so if you want to read it, you can. Okay. These are things that have to be improved according to this study. And there are, you got to make improvements to the place where the water is taken in. And they're going to cost about $4 million. You have to expand the capacity, that's $6 million. Then there are improvements that need to be made to the water treatment plant. You want to improve pre-treatment, that's $25 million. You want to change the method of treatment of the water from chlorine, which has some negative consequences, causing residuals. That's $20 million. And they want to improve the solids handling. That's $12 million. Altogether, there's $60 million of improvements to the water treatment plant. These are all improvements that need to be made, but they don't have anything to do with transferring water to Soquel Creek. These are improvements that Santa Cruz is going to make on its own to its own water infrastructure. They're needed. I support them. We all support them. Fascinating. Okay. So. Okay, well, the next slide shows that all those costs drop out. While they're important improvements to the water treatment system, none of them is essential or even needed to make the water transfers that exist today possible. So the number goes to zero. Soquel Creek's had a hard time understanding that. There, I'm not going to spend any time doing that. So, what we would like this regional agency to recognize is that we have got water in substantial amounts. It may not solve the entire problem of the water supply for the next 25 or 50 years, but since it is available immediately, since it costs less than $1 million to implement, it's the thing that we need to do first. We're having a hard time getting that point made. Just as you learned that the water districts didn't care to come to the meeting tonight, when we go to their meetings, we're not allowed to make these presentations. I can't be negative about it because if that's after 6.5 years of doing this, there's no point being negative about it. The point is to carry the message. Carry the message to your friends and neighbors. Come visit our website. If you have questions, ask questions. We won't run through questions. Go to the Mid-County Groundwater Agency and see if the Mid-County Groundwater Agency incorporates this into their plan. And we could get water to flow very quickly if we have the will to do it. I think 25 people in this room times 3 or 4 friends is a significant action. So I think I make it 6 or 8 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Killed the video.
Since the other people, Jared Paul is going to present too, but since some of the other panelists didn't come up, before we take questions, I just want to add a few things. Scott and I and a bunch of other people have been doing this for a number of years. We have presented to Soquel Creek and Water District and to Santa Cruz City Water District. We told them this a couple of times. They have been working together. And the reason is that they had a water supply advisory committee in Santa Cruz City that was very expensive, 15, 20 people that worked for a year and a half. And when they came out with their recommendations, water transfers was their number one. They support, in theory anyway, the idea of sending water from the San Lorenzo treated water to here. They had some discussion about whether that means going right into the aquifer or in lieu means that we all drink that water and then the aquifers can rest. But they're totally behind transferring water. Soquel Creek doesn't want to do it. The reason that they don't want to do it, they're very straight about it. They got burned working with Santa Cruz City when they tried to do the Desal plant together. People politically got together and said, Desal is a big shuck and jive. We don't need to spend our money on that. It's bad environmentally. We're not going to do it. Santa Cruz City voted against Desal. Well, Soquel had put in millions of dollars into the study by then, and they felt that Santa Cruz City burned them. And so they decided, and these are people that I really like and respect. The 3 main board members were elected to figure out how to replenish these aquifers that had been depleted for 20 or 30 years. So they regrouped and they decided we've got to get some kind of system that we can control ourselves. And so they're going for this pure water, which is the cleaned up sewer water. I'll say 3 more things and then we'll take the questions. So the water stack was their first choice. Soquel Creek has an urgency. We all live in here, and we have saltwater intrusion right at our door. And so we can't really wait till 2023. If we had to, who knows what would happen, but we don't have to. We have something that can start now. In fact, as Scott said, we already sent them some water from the pipeline. It works. So then Soquel Creek recently, this last half year, said to us, well, we have to flush the pipes. Because rightly, everybody got worried about Flint, right? That they don't want to have new water coming into pipes and discharging or dislodging stuff on the inside of the pipes that would be toxic. So they flushed their water, so we got that done. But the saltwater intrusion models that they have show that in a few places the saltwater is already on shore for us. And that the whole modeling can't really tell very clearly how much more time we have before it's on us. So that's another thing, saltwater. Santa Cruz City said, oh, well, while you dither over there, we have other districts that we can play with, and they are. Santa Margarida aquifer is a nice aquifer. They don't have to worry about saltwater intrusion in Scotts Valley and San Lorenzo. Both of those water districts are talking to Santa Cruz City, saying, send us your water. You have extra water, we have storage, we'll play. So I think Soquel's making a big mistake. The last thing I want to say is that there are really good environmental benefits to recharging our aquifers. Right, that we don't even usually talk about. When you recharge the aquifers, then the streams get recharged. So Fish and Game is for this. They think that that's a good idea. The whole saltwater intrusion the water keeps running through it, so it's pushed off. We have so many reasons that we need it now here. And we can't make Soquel see the reasonableness of this solution. They admit to the urgency. They're not hiding from it. But they still are saying, nope, we have to control our own. So as far as we can tell, the only thing that's going to change that around is a bunch of citizens putting some pressure on them and saying, why are we crazy? Why are we going to spend $65 million? We can spend $650,000 to start the thing. Let's do a pilot. Start it for 3 years, see how it's going. If it's going well, we'll put more water into it. Scott did some amazing studies, which we showed to the districts, showing that even in dry years, there's tons of water in San Lorenzo. Even in these, historically very dry years, there's plenty of water pressure. And how much could we have had last winter? Now we really think about it. So, okay. So now I gave a little too much spiel. We'll wait for 1 minute because there's some questions first, okay?
Sure.
Good. Okay, so you first.
Yeah, the $650,000, will that be shared between Santa Cruz and Soquel Creek? Or is that all on Soquel Creek?
That's what Soquel Creek says is their share.
Okay, okay. And everybody agrees with that? I mean, is that
For the
fine
pilot, do they
for the pilot? I mean, is that enough to get it going?
I've asked them, and, you know, that's what I heard back. I
Okay.
think it's low, but, you know,
Right,
it's not a lot of money. I mean, to me,
Right.
compared
well,
to
they spent,
the other.
the other night, they passed spending for almost $1 million like that on other
They
things.
found, the Midland
Yeah.
County Water Agency found tons of money to give to this one, and that was-
Right, but anyway, so I don't think the money issue is a problem, it's just them understanding the urgency of getting this water from the ground. And would it be able to start by this winter when the flow is really high?
They're doing what's called a pipe loop test.
Right, we know about that.
And they say they have to use winter water to do
Right.
pipe loop test, so the test is supposed to start this winter,
Right,
which, you know, could be 2 months from now.
right,
How long that test has to run, I don't know. They probably have to do what everybody else has to do when they blend water. They're gonna have to put orthophosphate into the pipes and condition the pipes
right.
so that they resist releasing the scale. I guess it's impossible, or I guess they don't want to put the orthophosphate treatment in advance of the pipe loop study. I don't think it's going to happen until the next winter, the winter of this 2018 winter.
So maybe a
Water's
year
there,
for this,
but a year from now, I think a year from now, we'll be dancing in the streets.
Hmm.
And, you know, the money is important because we're all going to pay for that.
Right, exactly, oh, it's the taxpayers. They
No, the
oftentimes,
ratepayers.
well,
Yeah,
exactly,
you're right,
ratepayers
and
too.
we're all going to pay.
But it's just, you know, they seem to think that it's free money and that they can spend it any way they want. Well, you know, people have worked hard for those tax dollars and those rate dollars that they're paying, and they're coming up with another rate increase here at the beginning of the
They've got to
year.
keep doing it so that we have
Right.
to ramp up to what they think they need to spend.
Right,
So let me put a footnote on that. Santa Cruz has instituted a major series of price increases that has two components to it. And maybe most of you are aware of this. The one part of it is to switch from a program where the majority, I think it was maybe 60% was fixed and 40% was amount of your usage, and they flipped it on the belief that if you could put more on usage, then people are going to pay more attention to their usage and less on fixed, which they felt also was fair as sort of a social justice thing. If you're older and you're just using a little bit, why should you have to pay quite so much? Why should it be balanced that way? So that's one change they've already instituted. The second change is a major increase for the infrastructure to do the kinds of things that Scott outlined. So that's already baked into Santa Cruz. And there would need to be some expansion of pipes over time to be able to deliver more water, but that's modest from a Santa Cruz standpoint. So this really is a SoCal Water District issue, and it's a question as to what's the trade-offs for this community, you know? But because Santa Cruz has enough water, the only thing it's buying is more security on drought. It turned out, just saying, I'll end this with just this. Santa Cruz never did have a water problem. All this issue that Santa Cruz had a water problem was erroneous when you really look at the kinds of figures that Scott has outlined. It had a management problem as to how it went about managing the water that it had. And I think that's a very different issue than what SoCal has had to deal with. So
So do you realize that this got many and you and the Okay, that'll be nice.
A couple of points and or questions. Considering how much money is involved here, tax money, is there any work or any thought being put forward to allowing people who would be impacted by this to vote on what question they prefer? And if there were a vote on it, then it seems to me that some neutral party would have to sort out what the different ones actually cost, and that would be good. And the other is, I'm not familiar, and maybe you guys or others are, how much attention has been put into the energy cost of comparing these two methods. I mean, I know that it takes a tremendous amount of energy to force water through reverse osmosis. And it sounds like a lot of what the water transfers would be involved with is moving water. Some of it would be using gravity, but some energy would be needed to move. But I worry about not only the cost, comparison to the cost of recycled water, but also it seems increasingly likely, almost inevitable, that at some point we're going to have a major collapse of the grid system. And is anyone looking at how long we would be able to have backup energy for these two kinds of systems? So that's a lot to toss out. I don't know how much anyone wants
I
to
don't
comment
know
on.
if we can answer them right now, but we can make sure that we have those ideas.
Well, there's some rules of thumb that desalination is 10x the energy of a conventional water system, and that reverse osmosis treatment of recycled water is half that, so that would be 5x. In our case here, that's probably even more exaggerated, because the natural flow of the water down the river is downhill, and the water that starts, the source of water that starts for the recycled water is at sea level over at the near lagoon, so it's not going to be less. It will be more. Plus, it has to be pumped into the injection wells and pumped back out of the injection wells, whereas the water that goes in the pipes only has to travel once.
Any chance of a vote, just being put to a vote?
No, they won't do it unless we say, that's what happened with Desal. People just insisted that they wanted to vote on it, and then they got to vote on it. So unless there is a real strong citizen push for that, then I can happen. No one has even talked about that. And backup energy is a good question too. I think for the ones that we can't answer right now, just keep track of what the questions are and see if we can find out any answers to this and put it up on the website.
Yeah, hi. I certainly prefer the river water to the sewer water, but I have my concern about the river water is that, as this gentleman over here pointed out, Santa Cruz is going to want some back during the next drought. And I can't imagine, one, how we'd have enough water here to give them to them then, and two, it's my real question is, how much water is Santa Cruz wanting back? Are they giving water, or are they giving 1 million gallons and they want 1 million gallons back? So what's going on there?
This is not the water that they drink from. This is the extra water that's going into the
The river water,
Yeah.
if they give 1 million gallons of river water, are they going to want 1 million back? Do they think it's like...
Well, what they asked for us when we sent last year, when we sent some water over to them, was just enough for 4 days, what they asked for.
We gave it to them.
We
But
gave it to
what you guys are proposing that Santa Cruz give their water to us. But they're going to want it back, as this gentleman said. How much are they going to want back? And how do they think the water sits in the ground here waiting for that magic day that they want it back?
Okay.
It doesn't work that way. It's
No.
not a cup down there.
It doesn't sit there, and that's a good thing, because it's pushing out our salt water at the same time, so it's always going in and flowing.
Right,
So
so
there is a question.
it might not be there, their water, the day they want it back.
That's right.
I think it's fair to assume that they're going to expect the water back at some point in the future.
A gallon in,
Not
gallon
free
out.
water. You know, there's no free money, there's no free lunch.
Well, someone needs to know this. It's kind of part of the presentation, I would think.
Yeah, definitely. And Rosemary, the head of the Santa Cruz City Water Department, they talk openly about one of their doubts is can they get water, will they be able to get water back when they need it? And until the groundwater imaging study is completely finished, no one can say for sure. But we can say that once the aquifer starts to fill up, if Santa Cruz needs water, we'll send it to them. So we're not going to be sucking from that aquifer. If we do this in lieu, we're going to be drinking that water. And the aquifers will be filling up. If they need water back.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said there was a question of whether it would be injected, the river water, or just drank straight out of the pipes. I didn't know that we had gotten... It sounds like you're saying now it's not going to be injected. It's
We're trying
in the pipe.
for it not to be injected. We're trying for the aquifer to recharge itself while we drink treated Santa Cruz, San Lorenzo River water. and the aquifers recharge themselves. The estimate's been between like 5 and 15 years to recharge. And so we'll be drinking the water that will be piping into us while the aquifers are recharging. What we don't know is how leaky it is. And Bruce Dennis from the Soquel District has made that point many times. We just don't know how fast the water will be going out. We want the water to go out, but there's a couple more. You want to answer that, Bruce?
Well, I have a couple of things to say about that.
Okay.
About the water that Santa Cruz is going to run back. There are two ways the water can come. One is a purchase, and the other is water banking. You need to understand the second point, which is that right now the water is flowing out to sea. So any water we get, if it's 100 gallons of water that goes in the pipes and goes to Soquel Creek, reduces the amount of water that Soquel Creek takes out of the aquifer, however that water got into the aquifer. So the real opportunity cost is zero. How we divide up the water is a subject of negotiation, but it's a little bit like putting the cart in front of the horse, because the questions, the dividing questions of how do we get water back out, while we don't answer them, we lose the water. We need to understand that the water that's flowing out the mouth of the San Lorenzo River will not come back for 100 years. That's the hydrologic cycle of salt water evaporating, falling in the mountains. So even though we don't have those worked out, it's still valuable to take the water and use it while we sort these other things out. I think the third question about it is only to clarify that we're not talking about putting water back into the aquifer. We're just talking about leaving the water that's in the aquifer and let it build up. Our monitoring wells are rising. The level of water in our monitoring wells is rising, even though we're in a stage 3 drought. It will probably go up higher this year because we had such enormous rainfall. I have a good friend that I just spent 4 days in the mountains of Oregon, who's a fish biologist in Oregon. And we were talking about, can you test the age of the water that comes down through the aquifers? And he said, yeah, we've been doing that. We did that on the Metolius River. The Metolius River is a spring-fed river in the Cascade Mountains of Oregon. And we put some radioactive particles in there 35 years ago. Nobody's ever seen them since. So it may be a long time, this recharge that nature provides for us, maybe on a time cycle that we have no appreciation for or understanding. But if we don't take water by taking it from the wells, out of the aquifer, then it's there. I don't have any guarantees, but I still think if we can take water that's going to leave the river in 2 days and send it to Soquel Creek, it's a pretty good idea.
Okay, so we have another presentation, and Curt might want to say something too. Let's do the 2 questions that were asked, then we'll go on to the other ones, okay? And we can always come back and talk more about it. The cost is definitely something Soquel and Santa Cruz are talking about. Yes?
I have 2 questions. One is, if the water is brought from Santa Cruz, can it be stored within Soquel? Do we have any storage facilities for water if we had the rights to, or got some deal to bring it in, so that it would also be housed in this district? And number 2 is, how can we have leverage over the Soquel Creek Water Board in terms of making a change? Do we have to re-elect the whole new group, or how would you suggest strategically? You know, it's one thing to show up.
Thank you. Let's just start with the first one. The storage place that we're talking about is right underneath our feet. It's the aquifer that we've been depleting the last 20 or 30 years. And that's where the water would go into. The water will go out into the ocean. You know, the aquifer is underneath, right? The water will go out into the ocean at some rate, but the aquifer will be recharged at some rate too. So that as more water comes into it and some water goes out of it, there will eventually be some kind of a balance. And that's where the water stays. If Santa Cruz City needs it, that's where we get it back from to give to them. The second thing is political, right? Any political body that's elected wants to hear from their citizens, right? They have somebody from Soquel Creek Water District, and that's what they want to hear. They want to hear from all sides of their people, of their customers' viewpoints, so that they can figure out what they're doing. They're elected officials. And that's how you do political oppression.
I think a footnote on that is to recall that in Santa Cruz, the desal plant was, everything but just signing on the dotted line when a bunch of people got a charter, got enough signatures for a charter amendment. And there was a 360 change on the city to hold things up. So, that was, and it wasn't that many people. It was some fanatics, to be sure, to get these signatures. But I think it was something like 6,000 signatures, and it changed the face of it. Even though there were long-standing city leaders like Mike Rodkin and Cynthia Matthews and others who said, "You'll do this over our dead body." So they were not supportive of this at all. And yet it was turned around. Ultimately, the water director left. There were some major changes as a result of this in the policy of the Santa Cruz City Council.
On your way out today, I reprinted a two-page thing of the history of what's been going on here for a while.
If I
So, yeah.
just maybe put a fine point on what you said, it was, the way I understood it, the EIR was finalized, and it was going to they were going to vote on a record of decision, and the pressure came from the petition or whatever it was, and it was at that point they just said, we're not going to make a decision, we'll just put it on the shelf. Okay, no decision. So maybe that's a point of intervention in this case where they're doing an EIR as we speak, and maybe the strategy is to get signatures and tell them, no, this isn't going to fly, we're not going to go with the reclaimed water system.
And the EIR has a requirement for public input, so it's a good time to contact whatever water district you think should hear about it and say what your opinion is. Do you have a question? Yeah.
Yes, several.
Wait, hold on one second. Jude, can you open the door a little bit more? I know it's noisy, but it'll be cool. Can you open the door a little bit more?
Jude,
She's
just open the door.
She's
Okay.
good.
Yeah,
She's
okay.
good. Okay, we'll go back.
Yes, okay.
So
Thank you.
I would love to ask a few clarifying questions, and I'm Monica McGuire. If I could ask everybody in the room to please say your name before you speak, because one of the issues is not knowing each other well enough. So when you just said that Mike Rodkin and Cynthia Matthews were angry, they were for the desal? I don't know if the San
Oh, yes.
I didn't follow it close enough. Okay, every now and then, if we can catch each other about saying this or it, if we can repeat what it is that was being said, because otherwise I'm lost in a whole lot of questions that I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Right.
And then a really obvious question that links to Carl's is, Carl Merritt, is that I want to know, is it more powerful to write before to the Soquel Creek Water District and get a lot of people writing in addition to going in? What are the things that will get attention besides perhaps becoming fanatical and getting 6,000 signatures, which sounds like a good idea in some ways, except maybe now there's already blocks up to that working again. I want to know anything you can help us all understand.
Well, I can answer a little bit of that. That when somebody writes, by the way, the two of you are standing up, if you open up those doors, you'll get chairs. They're the Soquel Water District has the obligation, like any public agency does, to publish whatever written information comes their way. So in the beginning of a water district meeting, there's an open time to talk about whatever you want to talk about. That's not on the agenda. If this is not on the agenda, and you want to get up and say, "What, are you crazy? How come we're not having water transfers?" You just stand up and say that. If in addition, or instead of, you've written a letter, it's included in the minutes. They all get that. If you write to the clerk or the board, they distribute it to all the people that are on the board, and they have to print that stuff so everybody can see it. You have another question?
Yes, along those lines, has anybody asked the question of, did they actually mediate with City of Santa Cruz in order to get a mediated agreement instead of saying, we just don't trust them? Because mediation is a pretty established idea that doesn't seem all that hard to get to.
Okay, so I want to say again that I like and respect the people on the Soquel Creek Board, and they think that they're doing their due diligence. They talk all the time to Santa Cruz City. Now there's another agency, the Mid-County Groundwater Agency, and that's an agency that might even get them talking more, which is what we want. We want them to actually say to each other, there's obviously a regional problem, come on, let's solve it together. But yes, they do work together all the time. The trouble is, I think their solutions weren't the same. Santa Cruz City, the Water Supply Advisory Committee told them go for the transfers. So Pell Creek said, we're not going for the transfers, we're going for the purified water. So
Even though it's 100 times the cost.
so you need to stand up in front of everybody that meets and say that. And we've been trying to do that, but we haven't had enough support, which is one reason we're trying to drum this up a little bit and get people to understand it. So, Curt, do you want to say some stuff? We'll do questions again, okay? We'll do more questions.
Actually, my suggestion is that Jerry has a related, if not alternative, approach to
Good.
water for Santa Cruz. We probably could hear
Yeah,
that.
so let's do Jerry. The reason that Curt is here is because half the water in Soquel Creek District is taken by private homeowners.
Well, not.
Not that.
Oh, I thought it was half. How much?
Isn't it like 12 or 13%?
Oh, I thought it was.
Yeah, why don't we let Jerry talk, and I'll talk a little bit about
good.
the groundwater.
Anyway, so that obviously, if we deplete, if we have saltwater intrusion, the well owners are in trouble too.
Okay, it's my work.
Yeah, you can start here, or you can start
You
here.
can see, you go way through.
So we don't have any other.
Signal just got
So Jerry-
stronger. You approach the-
Jerry, we don't have anybody else presenting, so why don't you take 10 minutes, okay?
The board will only give you 2 or 3, you know, city council. This is outstanding. I'm here to speak about aquifer. That's using Loch Lomond reservoir. Thank you. Thank you.
Jerry, can you introduce yourself first and say who you are?
Okay, my name is Jerry Paul. I have a master's degree in electrical engineering. I put in 6,000 hours pro bono so far in looking into the local water situation. I've been to hundreds of meetings. I've read a stack of technical stuff, maybe 14 feet high. I can answer a lot of your questions offhand. I don't have enough time. It's in the directory called Aquifer, and it starts with J. Paul Aptos Library or something like that. Maybe water or something. So I'm here to talk about aquifer. What would you like to see? What are the best characteristics of a water supply system? Just tell me what do you think is most important? Just we're going to go through a couple of these.
Clean.
Clean.
Reliable.
Reliable.
Cheap.
Cheap.
Abundant.
Cheap, huh?
Abundant.
Abundant. Yeah, that's a good one.
Intelligent sharing.
There you go.
Yeah, cooperative. All right. All right. I had the help in, I developed aquifer, but it wasn't myself. It was with the help of Rick Manginati and John Ricker, the county water director, and Scott, and lots of other people. And too numerous to mention here. The idea of aquifer is to recharge the aquifers cheaply and defeat drought. Do it fast, and it starts with water from the San Lorenzo River, by and large. Actually, it's all the water that Santa Cruz gets. Santa Cruz has about 15 water sources. There's 3 creeks up on what they call the North Coast, just short of Davenport. There's about 4 wells. Oh, okay, I guess I'll ignore the arrows on the map for the time being. Here's a map of the local area. There's 3 creeks on the North Coast. At Tate Street, there's 4 wells and a river diversion, like a surface, not quite a dam kind of a thing, that pumps water up to Graham Hill Water Treatment Plant. That's the center of the system where the water gets clean. The yellow areas here, I'm a little colorblind, so forgive me if I'm calling the wrong names here. Those yellow areas are aquifers. The one on the right side here is called Purissima. It's underneath Soquel Creek Water District by and large, but it's also under Live Oak, which is administered by Santa Cruz Water Department. On the other side of Highway 17, is what they call the Santa Margarida Basin, which is a sandwich of 3 aquifers that are sort of bowl-shaped, and it's pretty ideal for storing water. So I want you to remember one number. There's a lot of numbers here. You don't have to remember any of them hardly, except this one number right here, 3. Now that's the number of billions of gallons it takes to fill Loch Lomond. That's the capacity of Loch Lomond Reservoir. So it's 3 billion gallons. Santa Cruz Water Department uses 3 billion gallons, just a little bit less, 2.7 actually. And the consultant that Santa Cruz hired with his computer for many years has figured out that if we store another 3 billion gallons anywhere, as long as it's accessible, we will be drought-proof for a fairly worst-case drought of 8 years in a row. That's not just Santa Cruz, by the way. If you actually look at it and say, hey, this works, you know, so Cal can go along for the ride on this one too. So what we're trying to do is store 3 billion gallons of river water. Hopefully, at first, the guys with the biggest need are SoCal, in my opinion, because seawater is poisoning the coastal wells. And when you get a coastal well poison, it's a triple whammy. You not only lose the well, but you have to go find another water source to replace it, and build a pipeline or something to transport that water to the vicinity of the well you lost. So it's a bad thing to lose coastal well. So instead of sitting on our hands and twiddling our thumbs about sailing incursion, I think we ought to fill this aquifer so it pushes back against the ocean as fast as we can fill it. And we're in Loch, oops, can I have that slide? Yeah. You'll notice down here, 30 billion gallons a year average. That's the amount of water that comes down the San Lorenzo River. 30 billion. That's 10 times more than the 3 I talked about, right? And some of that 3 is coming from these creeks and other places. So, long story short, Santa Cruz only uses 7% of the water in that river. The other 93% go out to sea, basically, well, the fish like it, but they're not used for human purposes. And so what I propose is that we actually construct what I call a string of fire hoses, 10 fire hoses. Most water systems are like a string of fire hoses, and that, you know, they pass water on from one thing to another until it gets to the customer. If you pinch any one of those hoses, what do you get out of the end? Nothing. We've got that situation right now where out of the 10 fire hoses in the system, 4 of them are pinched. And with aquifer, I aim to very cheaply simply expand those 4. This is what they are. Starting up here, it's the question of, does the river have enough capacity to support the kind of water we want to take out of it? The answer is yes. We only use 7%, as I said. The next one, arrow, next fire hose. I couldn't find fire hoses in my graphics database, so I'm using these arrows. The next one is rights to take that water. The state owns all the surface water, including the water in Loch Lomond Reservoir. There are many kinds of water rights you can apply for. In my opinion, we only need temporary water rights because I think we can fill up these aquifers in about 10 years to an acceptable level. And so we could go back to near normal. We don't have to, you know, acquire water rights from whoever's going to let us use them forever. We can work a better deal for them than that. Also, I was talking to a lawyer who was actually working on a case in California some years ago. He's not a water attorney. You can condemn any property to put in a freeway or something for the greater good. And here we have the greater good. It's clear. And there's a lot of unused rights because 93% of that water is just going out to sea. I chose a marine collector, and so did operations superintendents and other people that are very knowledgeable. Because it is fish friendly. Fish don't bump into anything and they don't get sucked up any pipes. What it is a well that's set some distance away from the river. And so what happens is the water in the river filters itself on the way down through about 10 stories of river sediment before it enters the well. So what we get is filtered water. It's almost potable right there. In fact, there is a rain collector on the Mad River that was judged to have potable output. I don't know, health department potable. And rain collector is cheap. Next thing is to send the water through a pipeline to Loch Lomond. This pipeline needs an upgrade. They're going to upgrade it to a modest level. We need to really upgrade it because when those storms come along with global warming, after the droughts end, it's going to be statistically unpredictable. But when that water's there, we want to shoot it to the loch. And with a 30 million gallon a day size pipe, 42-inch pipe, we can fill the loch in 70 days, which is, from it's starting at 25% full, fill it to the brim in 70 days. If we use a pipeline half that size, it'll take longer than the winter we have. We don't have water rights extending into the summer. Fish need the water at that time. So it's got to be a big pipe. Then after, the next one is to make sure the loch is big enough. Like I said, 3 billion gallons, that's good. Then the water goes to the treatment plant. Is that big enough? They were saying no, and I'm saying, heck yes. We actually looked into it in great detail with people that manage the place and others. And we found it's not only able to supply Santa Cruz and SoCal all year with 2 MGD to spare, but we found that, let's say there's some glitch or something, or demand in SoCal goes up a lot, so that it doesn't quite serve the entire community. That's of no consequence, because you know how the summer we use more water and the winter we use less. If the tip of the summer peak is unreachable by the plant itself, that leaves a few weeks of maybe 1 MGD worth. And that's maybe 1% or 2% of the year's water that it did provide. So a 1% miss is of no consequence. We can use this plant to serve both our water districts, no question. Don't let them tell you otherwise. If you want more water quality, they can add little things like UV stage or ozone stage, or they can aerate the water. There's an article in the paper saying that chlorine is a problem if you let it go too long in the system, and so aeration helps remove that.
Jerry, have about 2 more minutes.
Okay. So the pipeline to SoCal is 1.5 MGD, not big enough, it needs to be 6 MGD, and support that rate going both ways, because some water will go back to Santa Cruz. If SoCal Creek Water District customers consume city water instead of well water, or in lieu of well water, we like to use the phrase in lieu, then the aquifers fill up because the wells aren't taking the water out. So when there's a drought, Santa Cruz would ask that some water be taken out. By the way, this aquifer is between 6 and 10 billion gallons, conservative estimate, and it depends on how full you want to fill it. So once remember I said 3 billion gallons is the size of the loch and the size of the city and the size that makes us drought-proof. This is twice as big as what will make us drought-proof, at least. And it could be a lot more than that. And then there's this other one up here that it will also help. Santa Cruz, if it's in a pinch, won't just come to SoCal. There'll be somebody else helping too up north. And up north, what happens is that they can, the loch is at such high elevation, we can just dump loch water on the ground up here and it'll soak into the aquifer without having to go through a treatment plant. That's because the pipe that goes down to Felton, if we put a little pipe back into to the area where the basin is, the quarries, Hansen and Ludwig Quarry and some other quarries, that we can just do what's called dry time surface spray. We wouldn't do it in the winter when it's wet times because there could be some flooding or a mudslide and that kind of thing. But in the dry times of the year, we can spread that water on the surface, it soaks in, and we don't have to pay for a water treatment plant because Mother Nature does it. Water that spends more than 60 days underground is judged by the health department to have been treated. So that's aquifer in a nutshell. We talked about the advantages. The first one is how much water. This isn't in the same order you suggested. How much water are you going to get? From aquifer, you get 2.4 times more water than you get from pure water SoCal. Pure water SoCal gives you 1/6 of a lock, and whereas the second thing was reliable. It's a redundant system. When the various agencies each have their own storage, whether it be a reservoir or an aquifer, it's a flexible system. People can swap water, and because of storage, you don't have to ship the water right when it's needed. It's not an on-demand. The city would be able to take more water, and so it's not going to need as much water from SoCal as people have been saying. So we've heard in the past, realize that there's not a lot of water that's going to go from SoCal to Santa Cruz. It'll be once in a while, and it'll be from an aquifer that's generally quite full. 2 pipes, a well, and water rights, 28 million. Pure water SoCal is 70 million capital cost, plus another 30 million in excess operating costs. You know, it's expensive to operate. You need specialized operators, and there's filters and lots of energy and stuff like that. Whereas aquifer, just gallons. So that's cheap. The pure water SoCal is talking water that's maybe 10 times as expensive. I mean, it doesn't compare at all. So
if they want more information, they can find out where.
Yes, at Water for Santa Cruz /aquifer. There's a sub-page in there. Acquire a water system free, and SoCal can save $100 million. There's 14,000 connections, so that's like $7,000 per connection saved. And so
we're going to put this on the website, Carrie. This presentation half an hour.
There's a pile of them over there too.
you want to pass these around?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll talk.
Okay, good. That's what we're talking about. Identify yourself first, please.
Doug Merchantmeyer, former director of the Water District. Your plan is very comprehensive, and it certainly addresses the issue of sufficiency, lots of water, more than any other plan, more than just by water transfer. Okay? Reliability is clearly higher. The cost you're indicating would be less. So why is there resistance from Santa Cruz or SoCal Water District in implementing something like this?
I've got 4 or 5.
What do you do here? What do you suspect?
One thing is a disregard for people's hard-earned money. They're using OPM, other people's money, ours. And so whether something costs 28 million or 128 million, it isn't the be-all and end-all that it might be to us. Another thing is a fancy high-tech solution, even if it's overkill, is a nice-looking thing on your resume. You get to brag in the industry. It's a career, good-looking career thing. The third thing is the city council, Cynthia Matthews, Ms. Desal from way back, just has the one that will not talk. And just very unenlightened, in my opinion, as a consequence.
Let me just be very specific. Last one. Is Santa Cruz Water District opposed to a plan like this?
I've had a lot of good remarks from individual water commissioners, but in terms of what they're voting on, and especially what Rosemary Menard, the director of the water department, has said, she's got another plan in mind. I think one thing is they don't want to negotiate water rights. Because, you know, politicians tend to be very risk averse. And if anything goes just a little bit hard to implement, it's, you know, well, it's hard to do. It's risky for her personally, but in my opinion, it's in our best interest to take our shot. If we don't get the water rights, we can still go back to Plan B. But I think, you know, we ought to do this. It's heck of a lot.
Okay, and I'm going to step in and say, Rosemary Bernard is against this plan. She is for water transfers theoretically. She's respectful. I'm not as cynical as Jerry is about their working together. They have tried to work together a lot. It's not a problem that they're not respecting or working together. It's that they really see things differently. Rosemary doesn't think this plan will come in with the cost that Jerry thinks it will be. She and Bruce Daniels and the board of Soquel Creek have talked many, many times, and they continue to work together on how they can start the water transfers. But since Soquel's heart is with this purification plant, there's no one really pushing that. The Water Supply Advisory Commission is done. They were the ones that said, come on, let's do the transfers first. They're not there to push. And unless citizens say to them, we're still interested in these transfers and we'd like to see them really revved up, we want someone to consider this plan seriously. This is an engineering bunch of information that you haven't really considered yet. With no one pushing that, the thing is kind of like, yes, let's go along and see what our consultants say. So I'm not cynical about them. I don't think they're doing it because they're politicians. They're ignoring the costs. They really do think that this isn't a viable plan, but they really also aren't opening their information gathering to this.
They haven't quoted it yet.
Okay.
Well,
Jen.
let me just sort of add something there, because I think it's important.
Okay, Jen, you're next up, please.
What Scott laid out, if you thought about this as sort of Plan A, you could then and sort of prove it out at a very, very low cost. It would start transfers, it would start to build the community awareness, the trust that is hurt over the Desal thing. You could then go back, because it would be proved, you could go back and do many of the additional add-ons that Jerry has talked about. You could then add a bigger pipe, you could do some of the improvements that would make this be an accelerated program. So these two ideas are not really in particular conflict. One is just a much bigger scale than the other.
I completely endorse Scott's plan. It's what I call Aquifer Phase 1. It's right on the trajectory I want to go. More power to them. The only thing is 10 fire hoses. No point in building 9, because you can just get a drip out of the end. You got to build it as a set. So they all have to have matching capacity to get the throughput. Okay?
But Santa Cruz City doesn't seem to be willing to do that right now, so we could start.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to what Jerry said. The fire hoses, using your analogy, of the more modest proposal that I have been studying, they already exist. We don't need to build any fire hose to make that one work. Whatever ultimate plan we have for our grandchildren, the water is here, the storage is here. But until we get on a track that aligns us with the natural cycles and capturing the water that we have, we're going in the wrong direction. So I have nothing against what Jerry is proposing, except that it's not implementable today, which doesn't mean it isn't a good idea.
Okay, Jen, you have a question, and then Curt said he'd like to talk, and Becky, I'd like you to make a couple of comments too, since you're the one who's been going to the 10,000 meetings. Yeah, that's okay with you. Jen?
Well, rather than a question, I wanted to make a brief comment. You had a flyer on the table over here, the National Water Research Institute, which a panel of experts that presented information, they were reviewing Pure Water Soquel, and this was last week, hosted by the Soquel Creek Water District, in the Capitola City Council chambers. I attended that meeting, and it was very informative, and there was two things that I took away from that meeting. And one was that technically the wastewater effluent could be purified to a standard acceptable to California regulations for indirect potable reuse. That is, indirect, it would be injected into a well, let sit for a while, monitored carefully, and then it could be withdrawn later. So that, they seem to agree, the panel seemed to agree that technically they could achieve the standards for indirect potable recharge. The second thing I took away from that meeting, and this happened towards the end of the meeting, when the moderator asked the panel, are there any concerns that you have? Two of the panelists, and there was no disagreement among the other panelists, said their major concern was the size of the district. Because you only have 14,100 connections, they felt that was very small to be trying to use this technology of wastewater reuse. It would be too costly. You did not have the customer base to make it affordable. That was their concern. They did not say, they didn't come out and say it's too expensive for your district because you're too small. But they said, those are our major concerns.
So I have a few things.
So I think,
Yeah,
as a result of that, I'm optimistic. I think the Solick Creek Water District Board will be much more willing to talk to the city of Santa Cruz in a what we call conjunctive use arrangement, surface and groundwater conjunctive use.
That'd be great if that's true. I hope so. I also read that those people think we need 100,000 connections to make it fiscally responsible. As far as getting the contaminants out of the water, San Jose has a treatment plant that just started for pure water, and Orange County uses it. But here's what they can't get out. So they don't test for these. They can't get out nanoparticles, medical byproducts, and endocrine disruptors. We've been through this like 100 times with them and have a long list of what they can get out. And what they can get out, they do very well. And they've been using it in Orange County for 10 years. I can't say, no one can say what the effects are on those people's long-term health. Because those three things, they can't get it out of the water. So for me, I don't want me, but my kids, or any of you drinking that stuff. You know, if we have no other alternative, you know, but it's not like Orange County.
Well, that's why,
we have
I
a source of
specified, they were using current
Right.
California
Exactly.
standards for indirect potable reuse.
Right, and we have like such an unusual situation here. You know, we're one of the few counties that doesn't get any rainwater right from the mountains. No winter snow water comes our way. And we have an amazing situation. We have storage, we have water. Those other places, yeah, if they have to use it, they're using it, but we don't know what they're doing to themselves. So maybe there will be more will. Okay, Jude, you're after Curt, and then it's Rebecca too.
One thing to keep in mind, though, when you're talking about those kind of contaminants is the San Lorenzo River drains one of the worst performing septic systems in the entire state. I mean, collectively, there's huge amounts of septic contaminants that are ending up in San Lorenzo River. So I'm not convinced that that is higher quality water than the
It's true,
reclaimed
it's
sewer
Santa Cruz
water.
City has been drinking it for a while now.
Well,
100 years.
I mean, the reality is we're all
That's true.
drinking it. I
That's
mean,
true. There's no getting away from like, this is a mess, you know? It's like that. Jude.
I'm not sure it's quite that bad from what John Ricker said, but assuming you're right, that there's a whole lot of septic gunk that's going into the river, I don't think it's true. There's still no real comparison in source water between what goes in the San Lorenzo River and what goes in the sewers. I mean, think about which would you rather swim in. But in particular,
I'd probably stay out of both of them.
hospitals, there's no hospital dumping into the sand.
And I'm not,
Let me just finish.
I'm not telling
Let me finish my point.
that.
There's hospitals, there's prisons, there's long-term care facilities, assisted living facilities, places where people use a lot of drugs. Those facilities dump into the sewers. They don't dump into the San Lorenzo River. And the second point I wanted to make related to what you were saying is that, this is huge, so I'm just going to say a little bit, but the regulations for monitoring indirect cold water use are really lax, in my opinion. There's relatively very few chemicals that are required to be tested, and part of that has to do with who made the regulations and their connection with industry. And maybe I should quit.
But Jan, I mean, Jude is someone who's been studying this for a long time, so that should be a good person to talk to about that. No, okay.
I'd like to say, first of all, that I may be in the letter of my water here. I've attended other meetings at Porter Library and so count that area on Main Street. A different group talking about the injection people anyway.
Talk a little bit louder.
Okay, my name's Melinda McCollum, and I live up by Castellanos Market. I'm on a well. I'm one of the people that had the original, one of the 1977 court orders on the well. And I have the paper for that. I sat down and read it. It seems not to give a lot of room for leeway. The court still has jurisdiction over this. But what I'd like to talk about is I was very upset about the injection proposal. And the reason I was upset about that is because of what you're talking about. All the things that weren't tested for in water, viruses, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, all of that. And yes, they do end up in the groundwater, but remember that people put things in the septic systems to get rid of them. Okay, so it isn't the same thing at all. They're disposing of far more things than what they're doing. Also, I would like to see it go into a direction where instead of you doing the injection, you're doing retention and detention basins, something similar to what Los Angeles County has done, where you stop, you're losing all of this water that's just going straight out to sea, that you can detain or retain some of that. And all of those culverts in downtown Los Angeles that were there when I was growing up are now, they use baseball fields and schoolyards, and they're using those as detention basins. Okay, so basically they're detaining more of the water, and rather than and I would like to see us go to that step first.
Can I answer now?
I don't think she's done yet, right now?
Well, pretty much. I just want to say that I'm concerned about it, and I see the state coming in, and I see the justification being that there's more people coming, they have to accommodate them, but what you're doing is you're taking something that is actually a property right, okay, away from some people, and that's what disturbs me, the wiggling away of property rights, and the court's already ruled on it, and coming back to it again at another time and another guise, and with a different agency, and instead of state directly, now we have someone else doing the state's bidding for them, but essentially it's the state, because we were told that it was mandated that they provide this, okay, that they provide housing and all of that at the last meeting, not the same group of people. Anyway, that pretty much sums up my concerns. I would like to see us move away from the talk of the injection and move towards detention and retention basins, similar to what they're doing in Los Angeles.
And some were none of what we presented today has anything to do with injection wells at all.
Okay.
And it's letting that fill up while we drink the water that's purified from San Lorenzo. Did you want to say something to that?
Yeah, the Los Angeles Basin has an almost infinite capacity for absorbing water. We don't have that here.
But there is a man here who is actually mapping the county as to where water from on the surface can get in to the aquifers, and so we'll know more soon. I mean,
That's all.
Derek.
Actually, he issued his map, Dr. Ian Fisher.
Yeah,
And there was some, I believe, misinformation from the city about that. The city said that certain area couldn't be used, and actually, if you look at the color code, the map said that it was prime area for having water percolate into the aquifer. And I've met with Andy Fisher many times, and we discussed this very thing, the aquifer. I also met with Bruce Daniels and with John Ricker about the question you were commenting on, Curt. About 15 years ago, I believe, Bruce said he was on a board that reviewed San Lorenzo river water quality and found it to be abominable from the standpoint of fecal coliform bacteria and the like. John Ricker said that the county took that to heart, instituted a program, and they really cleaned it up, septic systems in particular. I don't know if Bruce has now, Bruce and John are singing the same tune about that or not. One thing that came out of the more recent studies, done by the city, by the way, they actually studied the water anew within a year or so ago. A lot of fecal matter, it wasn't human. Most of it wasn't human, it was animal and birds. And another thing I'd like to say is the Randy collector, typical filtration, leaving particulates down to below 1 NTU, if you know what I'm talking about, methylometric turbidity units. It's smaller typically than the coliform bacteria don't get through a Randy collector.
Okay.
And
Jerry, let's have Curt talk about it. Okay, Cecil, you want to talk? Do you have any other one?
well, I'm saying that this is how Aquifer is handling this, and it's definitely a quality issue. I mentioned 3 things they could do at Graham Hill if they need another quality stage, and it would be cheap. I would ask everybody to pay attention though. Are they just going to give special treatment to the new water that's coming to SoCal, or are they going to install this any new gizmos to treat all of the city's water, which is, the city uses 2.5 times more water than SoCal does. So if the city puts in something that treats 2.5 times more water and sends SoCal the bill, it's arguably not fair. If they only treat what's coming to SoCal, like put an aerator in the pipeline halfway from Graham Hill to here, it's cheap and it just treats the water that goes to SoCal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I will start talking about what I came here to talk about in a moment, but I will just say that I don't know about river water versus reclaimed sewer water that's purified. All I'm saying is that they both potentially have the same issue. So I don't think you can assume that because it comes from the river, beyond coliform, the same people who are flushing the toilet are flushing their pharmaceuticals down the toilet, and we have the same potential issues coming no matter what the source. My name is Curt Abramson. I am a private well owner. I'm a small farmer in Aptos Hills, and I'm a member of the Mid-County Groundwater Agency Board. I joined that because I was concerned about groundwater like everyone else. So I'll step back and just to give a little bit of history about why the Mid-County Groundwater Agency exists. The state of California passed groundbreaking water regulations a couple of years ago to work towards sustainability in groundwater use. And as part of that, they offered groundwater basins that were critically overdrafted the opportunity to develop their own sustainability plans and to manage those basins. And in the absence of that development, under a timetable that the state set, the state would come in and manage it for us. So the Mid-County Groundwater Agency is a joint powers collaboration between the City of Santa Cruz, Soquel Creek Water District, the County of Santa Cruz, and Central Water District. And on a proportionate basis, from the budgetary standpoint, Soquel Creek is responsible for 70% of the operating budget of that agency. Each of the others are responsible for 10%, and that represents an approximation of the relative rates of use of those different entities of the groundwater basin. And the groundwater basin is defined, as Jerry showed on his map, as roughly somewhere east of Highway 17 up to a certain point in the hill, and I don't quite know what the demarcation point is there. And it then goes down and, for political purposes, ends at the boundary with the Pajaro Valley Water Management Basin. So the mandate of the agency is to develop whatever is the most sensible, cost-effective, sustainable plan for managing groundwater. And it's a very complex problem and very involved in many, many different factors. I don't have a proposal. I don't have any idea. One of the reasons I'm here tonight is because I do want to hear about these other things. One of the things that I've learned in the time I've been on the board of the agency is that it is so complex, it is so multifaceted, I don't think there's any one-size-fits-all solution to it. We have saltwater intrusion in some wells, we don't have some of the other issues that you encounter with subsidence and things like that, but we've got a lot of work to do, and it's going to take some time to sort that out. I will say that Soquel Creek obviously is the 700-pound gorilla, if you want to say it, in terms of their financial contribution to this effort. And they obviously are the primary users of the groundwater in this basin. So probably the most important thing you can do is, if you are a ratepayer for Soquel Creek, make sure you're communicating what your beliefs are. If you are not a ratepayer, but if, for example, you're a private well user, then the representatives on the Big County Groundwater Agency are John Leopold and Zach Friend, county supervisors. Their role is to represent on behalf of private well users. They also represent, of course, on behalf of ratepayers and everybody else in their districts.
So is there a room at the Groundwater Agency for public input during meetings?
Sure, but it's, in the context of the typical board meeting, similar to Soquel Creek and...
Well, they have some advisory agency that they just set up, and we did try to get some people on it, but they didn't take us. Becky, did you want to say some stuff?
Oh, I have a...
Introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Becky Steinbruner. I'm a resident of Aptos, and I'm also very interested in the water issues and have been for a long time, living up in the mountains and being a customer of a small water company that has had a lot of problems over the years, but is good now. I am interested in hearing from you, Mr. Abramson, what you as a private well owner, and you have other private well owners here, what you see as something that the private well owners really need to monitor, to be asking about, because you are the representative, one of three, for the private well owners. How can those people here communicate with you, and what do you see as being issues that will affect private well owners coming down the road with the Groundwater Sustainable Agency?
Well, I think all the concerns that have been expressed about, what water is going into the, what water is being used to restore the aquifer, what is the quality of it. It would seem that the ratepayers are going to bear the lion's share of expense associated with these projects. But you know, it comes down to this for the typical private well user. I want to know that when I turn on my faucet, the water comes out is reasonably good and reliable. So I think we all have the same issues as far as how best to stay in touch with it. Definitely pay attention to what's going on with the Groundwater Agency, attend the meetings. There are numerous public outreach events planned to continue to keep people informed or get people informed. I would also say that the EEIR relative to pure water is definitely one of the best opportunities people have to offer their input about it.
You know, I would just comment that if we all got here at the beginning of the formation of these communities and were aware of the geologic realities here, that we have aquifers, we have stream water, surface water, and that one part of the community is totally dependent and uses totally just surface water, and then 90% of it just goes out to the ocean. And we had another part of our community that was needed groundwater, didn't have that much surface water, has some, I guess, but not that much. We would say, hey, this is, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out, let's just do this in a way that can service our aggregate needs. The fact that we've got a problem is we've by historical standards, for good reason, these different districts and different political fiefdoms were set up, and we're still operating as if that's the world. It's not the world. And until that issue is addressed somehow, then all of a sudden you could find a lot of efficiency. I'll tell you one thing, this problem would have been solved a long time ago if it hadn't been two bureaucracies with two political leaderships that decided they needed to do their own thing because they had to be responsible to their own rate payers and so forth. Nobody was big enough to say, hey, we got to look at this in a completely different way. And I don't know how you crack that egg, you know, to make the omelet we need, but that's the problem. And I think if Soquel comes to the conclusion, Jan, that you were saying, that he cannot do fiscal, he cannot do for some reason the pure water, then we've got a chance to sort of say, okay, then let's get back, and I'll tell you, you'll have a lot of support from Santa Cruz residents, such as me, that, you know, we've got to negotiate a deal that is a win-win for Soquel. We can't be just looking at this as a commercial enterprise on behalf of Santa Cruz. It's got to be a win, and why wouldn't we do it? Because the water's just going out to the ocean anyway. So Scott said, it's not, you know, all we're trying to do is buy a safe deposit box so that if we ever need water, we could go to the bank manager and say, can we get some water back? This is just a matter of leadership negotiating a deal and breaking down some of these little fiefdoms. So that's
well said.
Okay. Jerry, you have to, and we're going to keep it short. Go. No, first is going
My name is Dr. Carl Merritt. I'm very much concerned about the amount of chemical pollution that might come into the groundwater. You know, the average mother now that feeds the umbilical cord to the baby has over 200 chemicals in it. Everybody here in this room has chemicals. If you add more to the groundwater, you might hit a threshold where it comes over. That's just a point of information why I'm very concerned, you know, where it comes from. It's totally different where you tap it, I guess, up the San Lorenzo River. You know, that's an important consideration. So I have two questions. One is, what's the cost to the ratepayers of water in different parts in Santa Cruz versus us in Soquel? You know, is one concern. I think we pay a lot more here for our lack of water and all the fancy treatment that Soquel water does. And the other question is, what's the time course that we have before Soquel single-handedly wants to implement this plan? What's the drop dead date by which we can stop this if we can?
You want to say something? Okay, I can't answer the first thing, but I know that the pure water thing, they hope to have online by 2023. We're saying that we could have the water transfer start in 2019. I don't think in any way we're going to discourage, this is just my opinion, so help you from trying a pure water thing. But if we have 4 years of river water flowing and filling up our aquifers by the time they're online, maybe we'll think again about it. As far as the comparative costs are, I don't know. Does anyone have a comparison?
Maybe we
You
should,
can look it up. I don't know.
Soquel Creek has the second highest rates in the state right now.
Wow.
And they're planning to institute a 17.5% increase on January 1 of next year and further increases after that.
Well, at least they are open about saying we're just going to get increases for the next knowable number of years to deal with all this stuff. Can you keep it fast? Whatever you would say?
Yeah, if I were in your position, Curt, as a not hooked up to the system, I would note that Aquifer fills the aquifers using rainwater. That, you know, there's no city water that actually goes into the aquifers. In this area, in SoCal. In the Scotts Valley proposition, water from the lock goes on land and filters through, and so that's arguably less pure than the rainwater that would go into the aquifer, the Purissima, that you're dealing with. The other thing is, the aquifer's quick filling of the aquifer is going to raise everybody's water table. So it protects you with very pure water and lots of it. So people who are drilling deeper and deeper, you know, to try to stem the drought or whatever, don't have to worry about that. And also saline incursion, the quick action of aquifer really keeps the ocean out. Instead of talking about 20 years till protective levels and then maybe another 20 to get back to where we were when we started, we're talking with aquifer of being about 2.4 times faster than that. And starting earlier, by the way, because it can start pretty soon.
Okay, so now all the people that haven't had a chance to speak yet, let's just keep quiet for a minute and think to yourself, you know, is there anything you want to say? Folks that we haven't heard from yet. And it doesn't have to be from a super informed basis. It has to be maybe what you're thinking about right now.
She has her hand up.
I had a question. Fox Sloan of the SoCal Hills. Nothing has been mentioned about the SoCal Creek and taking winter high water water off of those months and putting it somewhere. And in other meetings I've been to, I don't know where's the role around here.
I can answer that for you.
Is that there were some plans that property had already been acquired in the upland areas in these canyons that are basically unbuildable, to where they could dam them and contain rainwater coming down from the highlands.
Yeah, I can answer that for you. That's been examined in great detail, both by consultants and by members of the district, and they decided there's no viable option there that would really work. It sounds good, but no one could find a solution that would work.
I found one. I found one. First of all, SoCal Creek, according to John Ricker, is too flashy. Water just comes and goes, gone into the ocean before you know it. So one solution to that is put rain collectors along it so they can simultaneously, a group of them, take water right when it's there. And then as far as what you do with the water, it all depends on how long you want to store it for. If you're catching it at the end of winter and you're going to use it right away, or 60 days later, say, we could even use the Aromas red sands aquifer, which is notoriously, the water just runs through it quickly and out to sea. But if you're going to take the water out right away, we could get it and basically store it for 60 days, pull it out with wells, and it would save a little water. Oh, the other thing is dams are expensive. That's the real reason why Grand Canyon.
Maybe a brief response.
Very brief.
If anybody else.
The technical solutions have been out here for quite a while, and it's very obvious to anyone who looks at them that they will all work. So the question becomes, where is the political will? That's, I mean, all these things will help our completely do the job.
Yeah, because when I first moved in here, I don't know, 40-something years ago, people were talking about, let's make storage on Soapstone Creek, let's make storage in here, and everybody looked all around, they couldn't find a decent place for storage, and they gave it up. That doesn't mean that something like that could work. Okay, someone else who has...
Well, I just want to comment, that's what an aquifer is. It's storage.
Storage.
No, they
It's
were
natural.
talking about, like, let's use some of the quarries, let's fill up some of
Surface.
the unused quarries, let's put let's put a little dam on, here, and see if we can build ourselves some storage, and they didn't really realize that we have the storage. Yes,
I haven't heard anything
what's your name?
mentioned, my name's Dick Scheid, I am a private developer. I haven't heard anything mentioned about the saltwater intrusion problem down in the Pajaro Valley. The farmers down there are suffering, and they will keep suffering unless their aquifer gets water. What's your plan on that?
We don't have a plan for Potter.
That's-
Jerry has a plan for Potter, but they have the same problem that we have. They have
That's
to
another
figure out.
neighbor, one of
They're
them.
miles
This is a regional problem.
It's a
And I don't,
huge problem.
I'm too logical to understand why all this political stuff is going on. We have an area, Bower Creek gets what, 48 inches of water a year, doesn't it?
A lot of water.
Okay, around here it's something like 23. We have water in our backyard. If we can't get that and move it a short distance where we need it, we should have our heads examined.
We should have rights. Because it's so political instead of regional. Everybody sees it, but to do something about it takes a lot of people going to the right agencies and saying, are you crazy? Work together. This is insane. Our farmers down there are suffering. We're going to pay $1 zillion for our rates. Why are we doing this? But if you don't do that,
If I can speak to that for a moment, it is political. It is going to continue to be political. And you have to accept that reality. We have the same issues going down the rest of the Monterey Bay and the Salinas Valley. So it's a broad regional issue.
that's right.
The reality is that Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency is a completely separate political entity, and they have the same responsibilities. They also have a responsibility to neighboring agencies and basins not to make their problem worse by taking care of their own. So it is going to be a collaborative effort. It's going to be very involved, and it is important to express those opinions. But you have to accept the reality that the Mid-County Groundwater Agency or Santa Cruz City or any other entity doesn't have a whole lot of control about what happens with Pajaro Valley.
We have another response?
Yeah, there's another 700-pound gorilla in the room that's, I don't believe anybody ever talks about, and that is, you want to use this water to grow a city. It's all intertwined. And the quality of life, the people in control are destroying the quality of life in Aptos. I can only speak for Aptos, and I hear it every day. I don't understand how you think you can get more water and grow a bigger city, and then the problem will be worse down the road. In the meantime, the quality of life here will be destroyed. I hear all, their solutions to me are just making it worse. I'm sorry.
Well, that was one of the attractive features of Desal. Really, when you got behind who was driving Desal was a growth appetite. The developers were pushing, now I'm talking for Santa Cruz, which I was familiar with to some extent, what was the dynamics there. That was a growth plan. That pure and simple. That's why they wanted Desal, because it's guaranteed water, it's a manufactured solution, and okay, so it's going to cost more, and it's not environmental. Who cares? Because it'll guarantee water, so we can grow another condominium or another housing development or something like that. When you think about it, it's not surprising this happens in every political entity. Who are the people that are most concerned about and monitoring and funding, by the way, candidates? It's developers.
Absolutely.
Because they've got and I'm not, they're not, it's not hell on earth or whatever, but they have an economic interest to do this, because if they don't have the ingredients politically to grow, their business is shot down, or at least tamped down. So that's what was driving it in Santa Cruz, and that's why it took a charter amendment to stop what the political forces wanted to have happen.
So I feel that all of this new water and the MGA, the Mid-County Water Agency, it's all part of a growth policy. And I'm opposed to it. And in the meantime, you talk about...
Check out the website.
Thank you to our presenters.
Yes, thank you all very much. Thank you guys for coming. It was really happy.
The politics in this area.
Yep. Yep. Yes.
I'm sorry too. I wish we could go
I just didn't know all I
that any of these fixes are going to work or get implemented. I mean.
Okay, so the woman who just walked in is librarian. She thought we were leaving at 8:30. She asked us to round it up. So did you want to say one last word?
Yeah, I really want to thank everybody for coming. I thank the library for hosting this. I think there are a lot of good ideas that came here. This is not over. This is not the last meeting. We do have a website called Water for Santa Cruz. Please put your name on the email list. We send out letters maybe twice a month. It's through a thing called MailChimp, so it's very easy to unsubscribe if you get tired of hearing about it. There is a tab, the Aquifer, and there are other tabs that talk about the more modest solution that I proposed. So I thank you for coming. I thank you for the input that you provided, and I think we can all make a difference in this and get better than what is going to be given to us if we don't speak up and get involved.
I'd like to say one final thing too.
Anything else you want to take? You can help us by picking up chairs and putting them over there.
Monica has one other.
But one other thing for everyone to think about is that we've just learned things right now, and if we take what we just learned and go speak with at least 3 people and show each of them the incredible websites that these people have put together to understand waterforsantacruz.com and others, if you just go and show 3 neighbors and ask them to sign the petition that says we want to vote, then we start to do the thing that we need to do and get them involved.